Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 14 of the Divephoria.
Hell yeah.
I am Kobe, joined by Azalea as usual, and our special guests, Drakos and Froskurinn.
I thought you were going to tell me the special guest. I was like, what?
You're both very special to me.
Drakos is more of an average guest. You're a pretty special guest.
I used to be a bad guest. I used to leave for bathroom breaks, so I'll take average. That's an improvement over last time.
Bathroom break
You
guest.
blame yourself, you know? My work here is done.
He's a trailblazer. The bathroom break invented by Drakos.
Yeah,
and
left
popular left.
mid-show. It's impressive.
Look,
So-
sometimes someone has to take the fall for the greter good.
Is
you
that
know?
why
And
we
I'm
have a bunch of
I'm happy
cups
to
under
do
the
that.
desk
You
now?
thirsty, bud? You want some more water?
So anyways, how's your week been going? I heard you guys were casting MSI.
It's been good. We're up bright and early, 9 p.m. to record this episode, flip schedules.
Day and night is a really confusing concept right now. I refer to it as sleeps. Like, there's no tomorrow because I technically go to sleep and wake up on the same day. It's just after the sleep, like, we will commence. Like, the next show is after 2 more sleeps. It's not 2 days from now because that's complicated.
I actually
Yeah.
don't know what day it is.
Are you checking right now to find out what day it is?
It's the 7th, and it's Tuesday.
God.
Yeah, it's because you go to sleep and wake up on the same day. It gets
Yeah.
very confusing, but Play-ins was pretty fun. We got through Play-ins, Flash Wolves, Team Liquid came out as expected. Feng Vu joining them, who was, I think, a pretty big favorite going in as well. But we did get to see some pretty exciting games. I think especially Group A for me was a lot of fun. Group A felt quite competitive and I think a lot more fast-paced as well than Group B. Those were a lot of slower games.
I love how you're avoiding eye contact with me. I'm the Group B cast, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
Hey, I cast Group B too here.
Yeah, well, I mean...
I didn't see Group A until the best of 5 between Fong
Let
and
me clear.
Buffalo.
Me and Azale double dipped. We were given a light at the start. We're like, wow, hyper aggressive, different metas coming to clash. These teams are fantastic. We get to Group B and it's like, how slow can we make a game of League of Legends? Like, balance team, you thought you were going to speed up game speed. Oh, tower plating, you thought that was going to do it. You thought Baron, oh no. You have not seen INTZ set foot on the Rift, good sir.
I feel like I have missed so much watching the games at home, and you all have been on some crazy shit together.
When it gets to 4 a.m. and you're 6 hours deep in a cast, then someone pulls out, I don't know, a Heimerdinger bot lane. You're just happy to see anything. You're like, yes, this is great.
Well, I wanted to start with the series that we had most recently. So yesterday or last night, however you want to think about it, the Feng Vu Buffalo versus Vega Squadron, going all 5 games. I was about ready to just check out after the first 2 games from Feng Vu Buffalo, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of how I was expecting it to go. But Vega Squadron came back in the series, made a really strong push for it. How did you guys feel about actually, casting that series?
Well, I didn't cast it.
Who was on it?
Frosco
I was on
casted it.
I was with Pastry Time. I literally said, it's funny that you mentioned that. We were going into game 3, and at the beginning of the cast, as Vega Squadrons start to come back, I literally say on cast, I'm pretty sure most people probably turned off the stream after the first 2 games, and boy, are they going to be confused when they click back into this one. But it felt like Feng Vu Buffaloes lost their minds. Some of the mechanical errors, everyone was missing flashes. Game 2, they felt super arrogant, way overconfident, that swagger. They were just flexing on their opponent and just styling on Vega. Then Vega comes back, they pull out the Tahm Kench
And Vi!
and it gets way better. And suddenly these guys are flashing into walls, messing up skill shots, not layering their CC correctly. It was just complete deterioration of mechanics.
Yeah, I thought that some of the really good things that Vega was doing were Boss, top lane, kept using his teleport very liberally for the rest of the team. He did not use it to go back to lane, it seemed like, ever. And it really paid off for them, collapsing on those Feng Vu Buffalo plays, kind of countering some of them. And then the Tahm Kench, I thought, was so key.
Yeah.
As a Vi player, you're so used to going in and your mission is complete when you kill that target. And, what happens after that, you're probably going to die. But we kept having this Tahm Kench flashing in to save the Vi after the initiation. And it just made my heart swell.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Ananasek played really, really well. He was kind of 1v9, I think, in a lot of their wins, playing really, really well on Vi in particular. I did think that, the PvP bot lane, Big Core and Palette, I thought were really outclassing Gadget and Santos, but I did think that the fact that they kept giving over Tahm Kench allowed them to kind of neutralize some of that disadvantage and allowed them to play safe enough that they weren't getting punished as heavily in lane, because I did think that the bot lane for Vegas Squadron was kind of their biggest weakness. Like that was really their kind of glaring error. Were getting slammed by Flash Wolves bottom lane. They were getting slammed in the earlier games as well by PvB. But it was kind of interesting because like when I watched the games PvB played against TL, I thought Meliodas was playing so well, and throughout the group stages also. His Lee Sin game in particular, he was like 100% KP. He was like smurfing on TL. He was playing really, really well. And then watching him against Vega, I don't know if he was tired or sick or, what it was, but it looked like a different player. Like he was failing almost all of like his mechanical plays. Like he was making so many bad decisions. He was going in when his team was leaving. It looked like I was watching two different junglers. If the nameplates were off, I wouldn't have believed that it was the same guy.
I think it was an issue because I know a lot of people will focus down on the bot lane, and I do think that like the Tahm Kench pick was important, but it felt like the team themselves, because they kept allowing the Tahm Kench to go through. So if you're looking at it from Fongvu Buffalo's standpoint, they're like, this is not about bot lane, this is about jungle, and they started heavily prioritizing Meliodas's picks early on in the draft, like the battle between Rek'Sai. And again, nothing against Xmithy. I think he's a great jungler, but it's a very different style between someone like Xmithy and someone like Ananasik. I think that's why you started to see such a different view from Meliodas. And unfortunately, I think all the main stage teams can now look at what Ananasik was able to do to this team when you applied pressure to the jungle and then just start doing the same thing. Like, I don't think Xmithy is going to take another passive jungle matchup across from, because what, he had Hecarim in one game, he had Sejuani in another game, like kind of like more farm-oriented, pathing-oriented junglers. Whereas if you just take like dueling junglers, like you can put pressure on this guy and really just make him collapse.
And the thing that was crazy to me kind of about all of play-ins is when you look at these teams domestically, you see these huge strong points, and then when they come on these stages, how quickly those changes. Zeros was incredibly dominant domestically. I think he was pretty underwhelming as this player who was heralded as a top player. I think Ananasik was invisible in his finals. Literally nowhere to be seen. And their bot lane was actually smashing. They were using those creative picks so effectively. And then we got here, and it's actually in that series when the pressure was on, Ananasik like unleashed, once again, a guy who I don't think had a fantastic group stage performance. I think his lanes were kind of smashing it through and carrying for him. And similarly, Meliodas, when the pressure's on, instantly falls apart. And now I'm curious actually how Fongfu Buffalo come into this stage, because I had a ton of faith in the VCS and in Vietnam as a region. And after that Team Liquid series, I was like still on the hype train, completely on the hype train. But after those 5 games yesterday, now I'm like not sure at all what we can actually realistically expect from Fongfu Buffalo.
I was actually having this thought, like, so you look at a team like INTZ who get absolutely smashed in the play-in stage, and you look at that team and you can say like, oh, they have like a superstar jungler, he's one of the best junglers in Brazil, he plays so aggressive. But when you watch them on an international stage, like, no, that's true, that guy looks awful, like what's happening here? And you can level all those criticisms. So take like a team like Rogue. What's your guys' bottom tier team?
And it was 100 Thieves.
It's for sure 100 Thieves.
Oh,
Boom. 100 Thieves and Rogue. And like, think about all those times.
Bang just can't compete in NA.
What do you say?
Where you're like trying to like build up the team and figure out, like, explain to the viewers like how their play style is, but why it's not working. But in that level of competition, it almost doesn't matter, because they're just getting like, it's just the gap is too high and they're getting smashed. But if you take those teams and you put them in competition where you finally do get to see like them really thrive, then suddenly you can start saying like building up players. Like maybe you put Rogue and you put them in a lower level of competition, and you can start saying all these positive things about Senkux. I think it's kind of like the same thing about INTZ moving from Brazil into an international stage, or just any of the wildcard teams. Like it's so skewed. You think you understand a team, you think you know the play style, but if they're put in a scenario where they don't even get to play the game, then you don't even get to see what player you have.
I liked also your point about there being some positive surprises on a lot of the teams too, though. Like their bottom lane, Big Koro and Pallet when he's on Galio, which actually they got almost all the games, was insane. Like, the Kai'Sa ulting in with Galio ult was pretty cool. It worked out some of the times, then it started to fall off a little bit later, but maybe their bottom lane was surprising to me as stronger than I thought it was going to be coming in.
Yeah. I thought they performed well. And to your point, Frosk, I think it's an interesting discussion, because to me, I have always seen it as it's so much harder to be massively better than the teams that you're practicing against, right? Because if I'm playing against someone and I'm playing Nico Bot every single game and it works every single game, well, I'm like, well, this is ideal strategy, right? This is how you actually play League of Legends. And if you're playing against someone that is at a higher level, they may actually know how to play around it, or they have a strategy actually that just makes you feel like it's worthless. But until you are shown that, you don't actually know. And then once that happens, then you have to evolve and actually like come to the next strategy and figure out the next way to play it or the next build or whatever, right? And when you're not punished for a lot of these strategies, as so many of these teams are in the play-ins, extremely dominant in their regions, right? You know, some of these teams are going like 20 win streaks coming into play-ins. You are not being shown holes in your play because the level of competition isn't high enough, right? So I do think that is one of the reasons that the play-in stage is so valuable for these squads, because they're shown holes in their strategies that they didn't necessarily even know were there. And that's always kind of a really interesting thing to me.
Yeah, and the question for me then for a lot of these teams is how they take it back to their domestic regions. Of course, we only have the 3 teams making it through play-ins, and now I wonder if this just continues to be the evolution of the play-ins regions, if we'll continue to see it stack up the way that it has. This year's group draw was, of course, I think, very Group A favored. We've already talked about it, and Group B feels like we saw a lot more from LJL, but how much of that is just because they were in a weaker group, and how much will actually change for Worlds play-ins?
Do any of you think the 3 teams that did get through are going to be able to make significant improvements from the play that you saw there? Like, being able to play in play-ins, find, some of these problems early on, and then be able to change that in time for group stage?
I think I said this on the cooldown. I think we saw the height of Flash Wolves, and that's not to say that Flash Wolves can't compete against the main stage teams, but how Flash Wolves won games, what Flash Wolves do when they're ahead, and especially how good their positioning is, particularly Betty on the likes of Ezreal and team fighting. Like, I actually think you got glimpses of why Flash Wolves can be competitive in this tournament, because on their day in a 5v5, they can be one of the best team fighting teams in the world, I think. Super impressive, but that doesn't necessarily translate in like a 3-1 best-of-5 scoreline against Vegas Squadron of all teams.
Yeah, and for Fongvu Buffalo, I think that there's a lot of questions, especially around Meliodas, that have to be resolved because of the immediate drop-off in performance between days, pressure, sleep, whatever. If that is like him responding to the pressure of playing in high-stakes matches, does that go away because it's group stage and best-of-1? Does that get worse? But I think Zeros has clearly been highlighted as not the strong point that people needed him to be, and when Impact, who is considered on the lower end of the top region top laners, is pretty much smashing this guy.
I disagree.
Really?
I really love the story that you guys made for Impact, and I will say this, that when the ball was given to Impact, when he made the crazy outplay on the GP, like, absolutely. If someone's going to throw and someone's going to catch it, not only did Impact catch it, but he even spiked it on them and then, like, did a dance. Like, did his due diligence. But watching that, Saros was able to freeze the lane against Impact. He had a 40 CS advantage. He almost all-in'd him and would have killed him in the all-in, save for the tower shot that came in. Like, Impact didn't win that lane. Now, he's not supposed to. It's Gangplank versus Aurelia. Yeah. It is hard.
He also got level 2'd by Jarvan with the wave pushing away from him, and that's like a doomed situation because then the wave is pushing away from you. It's going to freeze, and you don't have flash to come up.
And to clarify, this is not to say that Saros didn't win when he was given a winning matchup. It's just like to the degree he didn't win to the degree that I think he needed to in order to completely shut down a game.
They didn't camp him though. Like you have a Shen, you have a Jarvan, you have an Aurelia, and you're against a Gangplank. You should be playing top side to use the Shen ultimate. You don't play to your Shen and then allow yourself to get Gangplank ultimate. I think that Fong Buffalo completely misread their win conditions. I think they weren't paying attention to Saros, and if they did, you would finally see Saros shine.
So then, do you think it's an issue that can be resolved? And then, do you think that, let's say that TL and Fong Buffalo find a rematch, do you think that they just start playing around top?
I would hope so, but they haven't shown that the entire time. They had Jace open for that entire best of 5, and only on game 5 they're like, you know what, let's play around our star top laner.
So is it then less of an individual issue about the top lane and more about Fongvu Buffalo just aren't willing to give Zeros the resources?
I agree with that. I think Meliodas has some... I would love to listen to comms. I think if you listen to comms, probably the loudest voices are that bot lane, because if it's a situation where your jungler's not saying anything and your bot lane's like, come gank us, let's do a bot lane like we want to fight, then he's going to go there.
My strategy.
Well, also, there are 2 schools of thought usually, and it is, play to your biggest strength, or if you're playing a team that has an opposite strength, do you try and shut down their biggest threat, which is double lift for Team Liquid, right? So it kind of seemed like they were taking that option in the attempt with all the bans at Core JJ and then
banning him, Quadra
focusing
banning
on the
him.
bottom
God,
lane.
so they just pretty much exclusively banned Core and Nick Smithy. They're like,
I mean,
the
they're like-
people who make plays will not be allowed to make plays in this game.
They're like, he won MVP. Baron.
Not this time.
I mean, the one team we haven't hit though is TL, and I'm actually more curious to see because I know that a lot of North American fans are immediately like, it's over, it's doomed. There was
What?
that one game where it looked
I don't
shaky.
think North American fans are saying that. I think this is.
I mean, I literally watched
Reddit
Dash
comments?
and Marksy on the cooldown be like, I'm really worried about Liquid. Things
right.
are falling apart. Like, oh God.
Let's do our takes on the teams that got through then, and the state that they showed, and what we think they're going to have in the group stages. And we can start with Team Liquid right now, because I did feel that there was such a big overreaction.
too.
However, for that series, to me, very little actually changed from what I had of my idea of Team Liquid coming into this. I think most people had the order of IG, SKT, G2, Team Liquid. That did not significantly change for me after this series. In fact, I found quite a few positives in this series. Team Liquid, they only lost 4 turrets the whole series. Impact did have those individual outplays. Not only that, but he also they were able to flex the Silas, which was something I was a bit worried about for Team Liquid. Their solo laners. Jensen also hadn't been that flexible, but he showed Silas and Akali. So there were these little things where coming into this, I had more worries, about possible different looks from Team Liquid. And I thought there were some good things. Yes, there were a lot of mistakes, and everyone's going to point to how they kind of rose to the playstyle of PvP, and it was very action packed. But they finished every game in under 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And yes, there were a decent amount of mistakes, but I did not have this doomsday sense or whatever, which we did see from not only NA fans but analysts on Twitter and Reddit and stuff as well. But yeah, that was kind of my take.
Yeah, I thought it was super overblown. Like how much people were saying that it was like, oh well, you see Team Liquid's screwed now based on this 3-0 that they just had with the 25-minute win, and it's like, so like yes, there were certainly mistakes and there are holes in their play, but like I thought Jensen as well had a fantastic series. Jensen I think was certainly a standout in that. His Silas game in particular I thought was really good. The Akali one, certainly there was stuff to criticize. That was definitely a lot more sloppy. He gave over some pretty silly deaths. But he also had like a lot of really nice plays. And the thing that's funny to me about this is like, so yes, there were mistakes, but Team Liquid won the series 3-0 against the VCS, which is kind of widely considered the best emerging region now, right? Like these days,
Yeah.
it
I mean, they've made it out of MSI group play-ins
beat
every single time
LMS
for the last
last year
3
at
years.
Worlds,
Yeah.
right? So it's weird to me to say, yep, 3-0, well, they sucked because those wins weren't good enough. And then you look back and you're like, oh wait, Cloud9, who got to semifinals, was 3-2, barely winning over Gambit at Worlds, and then went to semifinals. Fnatic, G2 rather, lost games in that play-in. Fnatic has lost games in play-in previously. TSM went to 5 games against Gigabyte Marines. It's not as though the play-in stages have always been so clean for the West. Like there's often, both Europe and North America have dropped games in play-ins, right? And so that's why I was a little bit taken aback by the response. Like this team is not like a joke. I think Fengvu Buffalo are going to take wins in group stage. I think they're going to get 2 or 3 wins. Like certainly, I would be shocked if they go 0-10. So it's not weird to me to be like, well, they had a chance. They were competitive.
Yeah. It depends on what your opinion was coming into it. For me, like I'm saying, a lot of people had Team Liquid 4th already, and then they're like, well, it's not going to work if they play like that versus IG. No, duh. I didn't think that was going to work in the first place.
A lot of things are not going to work against IG for most of the teams at this tournament.
I just think it's a play style issue. A lot of the the things that TL do well is much harder to see and to appreciate than when you see rookie, 1v6 style on someone and be super flashy. We expected that if it was going to be a TL win, that it would be probably a slower paced game, that it would be more controlled, that it would be about playing around kind of like your big boom moment, and that would be it. It's never going to be like an IG G2 where the Shy is like flexing on kids, and I think that's one of the big issues around the team. I find it like we were talking a bit before this idea of like modifiers, because it feels like Europe goes and gets to finals. And suddenly you see a team like G2 who's so dominant with their flashy play style. The fact that Fnatic were in the finals, everyone's like, okay, yes, Europe are finally in the conversation. Like, that was the modifier that they got. The LPL finally wins an entire year. They got Rift Rivals, they had MSI, they had Worlds, and now everyone's like, yes, LPL is the best region. Korea's modifier. Yeah, they took fourth, but it's still SKT and Faker's back. So you know that they're going to be up there. NA gets to a semifinal, takes down Korea in Korea, and everyone's like, screw that team. This region's never going to do anything. It was just because it's Cloud9. Put them all down. Even though Jensen's the mid laner. Like, I just don't understand how everyone else will have, like, their narrative changed around this big event except for NA. They just have, like, the plot armor on them. They just fly through. They're always going to be, like, the same white knuckle, like, oh, God, here we go again. We're about to get rocked at an international. I don't understand it.
People just don't have a lot of faith, I think, in any team except Cloud9 because they have failed so consistently internationally, right?
My heart has been broken.
Yeah,
9
been
times.
hurt before, Frosk.
I'm just like, G2's got the vacation meme. I know that they had that one good run against WE, but
to be fair, I mean, there's like still, I think, lingering doubt for some people about G2 because of those vacation memes. I feel like this World's performance redeemed them. They had obviously the good MSI as well, but I do think that like all it takes is like 2 or 3 good performances from a team to undo that. But
like,
if G2 choke and collapse here instantly, I think European fans are going to be back in the same boat. Every time we send G2, they're going to be like, please not again.
But the thing is, like, a completely different roster and a completely different iteration of G2. Whereas if you look at TL, it's basically the same roster, but they made improvements over the last 2 pieces that screwed them over at MSI previously. You know, they replaced their mid laner, they replaced their support. So you can at least take some of the logic of this team, because I hate it when people are like, oh, you know how they did last year with like 5 different players? You're like, yeah, they did do that, but this isn't the same team anymore. It's just the same name. TL, it basically is the same team, just with straight upgrades. And they were this close, a tiebreaker game of making it out into groups. They fix exactly what their problems were. They should be a better team. Maybe the meta has shifted away from them. I actually find that point probably more against TL, like if it's not a tank meta, if Impact does get exposed. I like that Kobe brought up, you know, the fact that they're flexing Silas, that we did see the Akali. I think that can hurt them. But from like a playstyle standard, if they get their style, I am much more confident in this TL.
What I will say is, like, coming in, I was kind of on the train, like, I think probably because I was so hyped about G2, like, oh, TL, they're, like, doomed. But the thing that I learned from this series, a couple things, is one is that, like, I think everyone highlighted Impact as a weakness. And I think that, don't get me wrong, it's still going to be hard for Impact. This is going to be a brutal tournament
because
for
I mean,
Impact.
it's Wonder Shy and
yeah,
Counter,
it's
right?
just
like it's monsters.
Yeah, but he can, like,
Zeros.
I think the way that he played showed me
Wonder
that, like,
Shy and Con.
he can make an impact in a depth. God, I really hate that his name is Impact. I really like, can we change? I keep making that.
Just say it.
Good pun.
Just
He
say
can
it and
still
roll through.
make an impact, even when he's put in a deficit, which I think is a good sign. And when TL got a lead at all in this series in any one of the games, it was instantly super controlled to close out. And yeah, there were moments of big aggression, but it was always felt like they were fighting on their terms for the most part. And outside of the first Dragon fight and the first game, it felt like they were 100% dictating the pace, and that kind of control.
This also wasn't the best version of TL. Like, I think that's fair to say. This best of 5, that wasn't the best look that you're going to get from Team Liquid, but does it matter?
Sure.
You
But, like,
3-0'd over the playing stage.
even when they're making like fumbles in the early game, the fact that the second they have a lead, they can play out a 4-1 and in some very small situations a 1-3-1 very, very cleanly is a good sign that you can keep that composure even when you're honestly spending the early game like taking bad fights and getting outplayed by Meliodas once or twice, you know?
Okay, it sounded pretty positive now. I don't think anybody's bumping them up the list though, right?
Well, I think if G2 play Promise Q and
That's the big
Perks,
question.
unless the carry meta, so this is how this goes, unless the carry meta is actually that important for the top lane and Impact simply cannot compete with this other caliber of top laner, then I start to wait towards G2. But with Promise Q and Perks, from what I've seen, like other teams in the LEC, other bot lanes have been able to punish that.
Yeah.
I think it's super fair to say that Core JJ and Doublelift would be able to punish that also. And I think if it's Promise Q, I think you have to give TL the benefit of the doubt. If you don't, I think you're kind of trolling.
I agree. I think TL's third if it's Promise Q starting.
Is Vedius trolling or does he have?
Vedius is definitely trolling.
I think
Vedius said that they're number 2.
But then he also said on Twitter that they're going to win the title this year.
and he did also say that Japan
So
were
That would be
insane.
number 1.
Yeah, it would be number one.
If
But
we
he didn't say
really
MSI
dig
or
into
Worlds.
it.
So
But I mean, you know, it's
here's the thing. I think peak
building
G2, like Mickey, no wrist issues, whole team on point G2,
Yeah.
could contest for first place. And I think that when they're on peak performance, the question is them versus SKT for who gets second more often than not. And maybe with a miracle run, potentially winning MSI. But at full strength, it's like they're pushing second and they're fighting for second. And then when you sub in Promise Q, it's like they're pushing third and they're fighting Liquid for third. It wouldn't be a question to me if Promise Q doesn't enter the picture, but I think until like the team fully confirms, one way or the other?
The last I saw was pretty long ago. It was like 3 or 4 weeks, and G2 said that Mickey will play, but then he's still not going to have practice, right? He said he was saying he could play like 1 or 2 practice games
like
a
2
day.
solo queue games.
Yeah, that's not very
But
much at all. So
ultimately, like I think Mickey, I have faith, like watching Mickey and having seen him perform, that like even with that schedule, because he's had that schedule for a while, that he'll show up. And my biggest thing for him and what he contributes is that he's a guy that knows his team really well. He's a guy that is not afraid to be proactive and to pull off like a crazy initiation in a clutch moment to win a team fight. Whereas I think Promiscu is very much going to be a follower in this team.
I think
he's the odd man out.
I think it's less than that. Like, I agree with you. If you compare skill for skill, like Mickey versus Promiscu, obviously you're going to give it to Mickey. But the thing is that Perks learned ADC in those 2v2 matchups with Mickey.
For sure.
And immediately in the Fnatic versus G2 game, when Promiscu goes to ward, and Miffy pointed this out, when Promiscu goes to ward, Perks doesn't back up. Immediately Hylissang engages on him, and then they burn the flash. The flash is then punished by a roaming mid laner, and then suddenly now Caps is losing his lane because of a miscommunication between his bot lane, and it just snowballed over the map.
Yeah.
So I think if you see Promiscu, like, pro tip to all the teams, 3v3 bottom and just see what your gamble can be. Get your mid laner down there and then just start getting as many kills as you can and spread it across the map.
Yeah, and I mean, I think G2, you know, at their best, is a super impressive team, and I think that they play such a lane dominant style. The thing that's so hard for me to like think of them winning the championship, just feel, and this is the same reason I feel like it's so hard for me to think of anyone except IG winning the championship, is because I just think that G2 is just a worse version of what IG does. They both play extremely lane dominant style. We saw Caps getting slammed by Rookie at Worlds. The Shy is an absolute monster. Like, Caps and Wonder are absolute beasts, and I certainly favor them over TL. Like, and I think that, you know, maybe that they're going to play even better, and if they can prove that they can compete in the solo lanes against IG, then hey, then maybe G2 can actually do that and win the tournament. But, you know, until they actually prove that, I think IG plays a very similar style, and IG has the 2 best solo laners in the tournament, I think. And I think it's just so difficult to actually compete in you know, a lane focused style where you're playing super aggressive against the Shy and Rookie, who are just better at that than really anyone else in the world. Like, this team, when I look at how IG played last year at Worlds, it was extremely impressive, and I've been a big IG fan for a while because I love to watch the Shy. You know, watching all their games last year, I already thought IG was an incredible team, but you always had these concerns of, oh, well, you know, Jackie Love has choked in playoffs, and that is kind of gone now. Like, it just feels like they're the same team from Worlds, except now they're not struggling with nerves, you know, in the bottom lane. He's gotten more and more consistent. You know, he hasn't had those flubs that he did against RNG in 2018. This year, he was monstrously consistent throughout playoffs. He never really had any of those kind of like head scratcher plays. So it gets really hard for me to really like positively compare any team to IG. I just think that they're so damn good.
I think IG's weakness right now, especially when you compare them to G2, is that IG will still go for a fight or like a collapse or a skirmish versus, like, if a game that IG ends, it's more likely that they'll end it by seeing their moment from side lanes, teleporting in, or collapsing into something, ripping someone apart, and then ending a game. Whereas with G2, I actually see that they're starting to think more about how they're playing with pressure, that it's not just about the collapse, that it can be about playing those side lanes, looking for things like backdoors, or kind of like building big experience leads, like individual leads, more than like collapsing or fighting. I don't know if that makes sense, but if I see a G2 win over IG, I'm like, this was a situation where IG maybe pulled a teleport a little bit too early. They tried to look for a hard engage. Maybe somehow G2 managed to like scrape out with their lives, and then like Perks, or not Perks, Caps is like taking an inhib or something with a rise, and then they're just trying to stall out, and it's trying not to fight IG and survive those side lanes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we can just keep going with IG, because it's actually such a super interesting topic. Going back and watching so many of their games, one of the biggest factors to me was, I mean, just the uniqueness of the jungler. I mean, we had so many moments when we're going through VOD reviews where he actually just opts for kill trades. Like, he knows he's dying going in into like a 1v3 or a 1v4 scenario. However, it is still a beneficial play. While a lot of people then like start flaming him, they're like, oh, what is he doing? Like, he's inting in there. He trades late game jungler like Rek'Sai or something for the enemy AD carry. And that is a hugely positive play. Whereas a lot of people then like start flaming him for, oh, he's too reckless. Why is he going for these tower dives or whatever? It actually kind of just added to a whole new dynamic for me, because he's so willing to sacrifice his life for the greater good, basically, that I feel like so much of the edge does kind of come from that willingness to make those plays. And the games where we reviewed where IG actually lost, they lost 2v2s top side early on, and they lost 3v3s on bottom side early on, and the other team ended up snowballing off those. So while that like did give me a lot of respect, it also that was kind of the opening that I saw. If people are going to have a way to defeat the defending world champions, I feel like that's it. Like, you have to take it to them.
Yep.
That's a terrifying prospect. That's like absolutely terrifying, because even just like we bring this up a lot, but talking to the EU pros who were able to scrim IG over the course of last Worlds, I mean, the stories that they tell about playing versus the Shy are like literal nightmare fuel. Like, I think it's Bwippo who's talked to us about it the most. He actually
scarred.
Scarred for life. He's like, I couldn't do anything. I just like, I can't. Just 1 second you're winning and everything. Next second you're dead. You're down 30 CS. Like, he was like actually so. And it's, when you look at the way the Shy plays, it's incredible. Like, outside of, I think, maybe 1 or 2 bad games, this is the guy where if you tell me on paper a champion is supposed to do something, he'll do it. If it's a Vladimir late game team fight, he'll do it. If it's some lane dominant bully, he'll absolutely smash. He'll kick someone's head in. And it's that is just really, really terrifying when he can do that. And I just don't even consider who he's going against. I just assume that that's what's going to happen, even when it's a guy like Wonder. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's too much fear and too much faith that I'm putting in the Shy.
I think you have to play with nameplates off a little bit, because if you give too much respect, he's definitely going to slam you, right? Like, it's because, like Kobe said, the way that they did lose when they lost was laning phase stuff. It is them losing 2v2s. It's them losing 3v3s. It's them committing to a play and getting caught off guard or getting outplayed, right? Like, you have to, I think, have confidence in yourself that you can outplay these situations, and because if you don't even try, he's definitely going to blast you, right? Like, you can't just allow him to choose when you fight and where you fight and how you fight, because he's so damn good. So it's like, it has to be Wonder and Jankos and guys like this, having that confidence in themselves to still take the 2v2, and then hey, Wonder with the league could beat him, right? Like,
I do think that, like, just to clarify, like, if he drafts Vladimir, like, Wonder's going to get a CS lead in lane. Maybe Wonder will get a kill. It's like, if they let him get to the point where Vladimir is really effective, he's going to take over the game. He's not unstoppable, unkillable, no matter what he picks. But when he's set up for success early game, he succeeds early game. When he's given late game pick, he succeeds late game. And he always manages to find those ends. And that's terrifying. But, like, I am optimistic that if G2 draft to set up and they say, hey, we're going to attack the Shy, one, bold strategy, but go for it. I think Wonder will. I think, like, he'll get the jungle edge pressure he needs. And then the question is, can the rest of the map survive while G2 are playing on a strong top side?
This is what I'm hoping for, because there are so many good top laners that are here with the Shy, that they do opt into this, But I love your Bwippo anecdote, because watching Shy plays, where he gets down to like 5 HP or something, he's kiting just outside of your auto attack range, and he turns around to get the kill. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it.
You're supposed to keep running.
Yeah, like his teammate is there with like full HP, and he could easily get it. But the Shy turns around with 5, and he's like, yep, I got you on the time. And you're just like, oh my goodness. Like those types of plays are what makes this game exciting.
And that's the nightmare. So this is something that showed up a lot when G2 was dominant, is that people talked about like the actual fear of playing against them, where like someone would straight up be like pretty much running it down, like hyper overextending in lane, but teams would play against them and be like, oh, that's G2. They know something we don't know. Like, we can't fight that guy. There's no way we can fight that guy. And
yeah,
that's a terrible situation to be in.
That feeling of, oh my God, he must have calculated better than I did. Or like, he knew all along that this was going to work out this way. If you start down that path and you assume that, then you're just like outplaying yourself before it even starts. And you're like, well, if the Shy is trying to trade with me, it must be good for him. And then you're just going to lose. Like, you're going to lose from the beginning.
I just want the shot where it's like the inside monologue for a player, and it goes over to the Shy, and he's just like, he's got like the Benny Hill theme in his head. It's just actually just like spacing out. He's just chilling, like, boop, 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 boop. Like, what is he thinking? He's such a genius. How does he know what is happening all the time?
I think I want to kill this guy.
All right, so let's return to because we touched on Fangfu Buffalo and Team Liquid from play-ins, but Flash Wolves, who everyone is talking about, Maple is gone, Karsa is gone. What are they gonna do without their big names? Sword Art is gone. There were some moments where I was pretty happy with their replacements, and I was like, oh, Boogie, some nice mechanics there, like some pretty good plays, dodged a couple things with Rek'Sai ultimate, and I was like, okay, I can see, this young whippersnapper is gonna be
How old
Carson.
are you?
I'm pretty old. I can say that. Boogie could be a great replacement for Karsa. And rather, I was a little bit less sold on Maple. I was like, you're gonna have a really hard time replacing
Sword
Maple.
Art too, man.
Replacing Maple
true.
for me. Shousey, like I was saying, I really did, like some of the plays, but after watching the full series, even though the last 3 games were like super confident, I was like, okay, they definitely have it in the bag. I still also did not kind of bump them up my rankings. I pretty much stayed with the last time we did our episode, the rankings for all the teams. I pretty much stayed with that after seeing the play-ins. I do think that while it's cooler that Hanabi is more confident, they can play through him more, top side. I didn't feel like I was going to bump up Flash Wolves after this, because even though there were a lot of moments where the replacements looked good, I was like, yeah, it's not going to come together in time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Hanabi, like, people are talking more about playing around him, and I think people are kind of remembering him at Worlds where he looked pretty poor, but at the last MSI, he was actually quite good. Like, he was popping off on Yasuo, and he was playing a lot of these carries, and he was actually looking strong. So I do think that this guy, can be a good top laner. The problem is kind of it just feels like, when you're talking about the TL 1-to-1 comparison, where it's like, okay, well, they took the weak spots and they made them better. It kind of feels like Flash Wolves is the same team, except they just got worse, right? Like, they feel like they play in a very similar way. It's going to be more about Hanabi and Betty now. So, like, there is that shift, way more from Maple, who have been kind of more of the star carry. But it did feel like all their replacements are somewhat downgrades. Karsa, when he lost, that was already, I think, a pretty big blow. That guy had been a monster for the team for so long, and then losing both Maple and Sword Art is really, really tough. Those are, I think, arguably like 3 of the best players, if not the 3 best players from LMS for so long. Like, they had dominated that region, absolutely ran it for years and years. This Flash Wolves was not nearly as dominant regionally, and I think that not only are the players perhaps like individually less skilled, they also have a lot less experience internationally, which makes it difficult to know like how they're going to be able to actually show up.
Stylistically, though, I actually think they will be the team that kills Team Liquid, if there is anyone. Because I think that... So think about this. If you have IG and G2, which are kind of like your 1-3-1 teams, where they play a lot about side lanes, Flash Wolves are kind of like a traditional 5v5 team. They love team fighting. They're very, very good at it. And I think that Flash Wolves stylistically mismatch against the raw speed and aggression of teams like or junglers like Klid and Ning, as well as Yankos, whereas like Xmithy is more of like a control jungle, and he can turn it on. But I think if TL kind of run their same style of like very controlled, waiting for, like, let's say Doublelift or Core JJ to be your primary carries, I think Flash Wolves can actually thrive. I'm not saying that Flash Wolves then beats TL every single time that they fight, but I actually think it will be much harder and much closer because of how these teams want to play, unless TL switch it up and try to play aggressive in the lane phase. Because what Flash Wolves are really good at is setting up multiple pieces at the same time for multiple objectives. So if you give them a passive early game and they just get to do whatever they want, you got like one guy like setting up the Rift Tail. You got one guy who's like about to stack a giant wave and then a dive is incoming. You got one guy who's like pushing the bottom wave, then he's going to TP into the dive. And so suddenly when they do pull the trigger, all these things collapse at once and they can snowball very far ahead. And then they become very strong in 5v5 and they're super confident and very skilled at doing it. So stylistically, I actually think TL need to pay a bit more respect to Flash Wolves. Just play aggressive in the lane phase. Like, Xmithy needs to step up there and lead that team.
That's the exact same description you used for EDG in the past. Do you think
That's
it's
because
EDG-esque?
Well, that's because some of the LMS teams use some of the LPL teams as scrim partners.
I wasn't sure if that was still ongoing, but that's the exact thing you used to say about EDG, about how when the first towers were up, they were an incredible team because they could make multiple plays at the same time, or would set up multiple plays at the same time.
It's usually HQ, but Azale does bring a good point. The Flash Wolves didn't expect themselves to be here. Everyone thought that they were going to lose to AHQ. That series was really, really close. AHQ decided to play on for whatever reason. Didn't have a good run. It was a bit of a head scratcher. So maybe the strongest LMS team isn't here, and there is that inexperience. experience, and I think Boogie can definitely be punished. Sometimes he just goes full solo queue mode, but if they have tempo, if they're in control, if the other team is playing defensive and kind of letting them set the pace and being reactive, I think that's where the Flash Wolves will actually thrive and show their strength, and you cannot underestimate their 5v5 ability.
For me, I was really, really low on the LMS coming in. As we've already mentioned, it's historically an incredibly top-heavy region, and I thought the loss of a lot of these players and the difficulty with the fact that the LPL really has free access to a lot of these players, and I think has just more resources to take a lot of this talent from this region, just made me think that they were going to fall, and this would actually be the year that the VCS rose above them in the standings. I think that the series that they showed gave me a lot more confidence in them, and specifically in Betty. I think Betty's always been kind of like was a consistent force, even on the previous team. Like, yes, his laning phase wasn't great, but he was like more reliable as he moved later in the game.
Fighter.
Yeah, and he's been solid. And I think that the team has continued to, while they don't have a lot of the same early game strengths that they had with Carson and Maple, the mid to late game I think has improved, as you mentioned, with that strong team fighting team. So I actually had them 6th, assuming that Fongbu Buffalo is going to get through, and now I have them 5th. And I don't know about them contesting Liquid. I feel like you have probably a stronger read on them than I do, but I do think that it's good for the LMS that this team is still probably going to be able to compete in a lot of their matches, and I still think they're going to need time to grow. Like, I don't think the tournament where they pop off, but they could definitely play spoiler.
Yeah, I think they can definitely compete. It's just if people are still expecting, they only watch international events and they're expecting, why are they rating Flash Wolves so low? They always get out of groups. They always, make it to,
Maple and Sword Art always get out of groups. some important things to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these teams can take wins, right? Like, I think we've seen, despite how incredible IG was in the knockout stage, they lost games in group stage. A lot of these teams, certainly, when you look back to RNG winning MSI last year, they dropped a game, 2 games in.
They dropped
group
a game
stage.
to Liquid.
Yeah, they dropped a game to Liquid. Certainly, like. It's best of one. People are going to try things. There's going to be, surprises. I think you should not expect this to just be like, yep, Fengvu and Flash Wolves can only win against each other, right? Like, these teams are going to get wins. It wouldn't shock me if they got a win off Liquid. It wouldn't shock me if they took a win off some of these other teams, because they are strong enough that, if you make mistakes, they can capitalize on them. And given an advantage, Flash Wolves, as you say, is a strong team fighting team. But I definitely still don't favor them over what I consider to be basically the big 4.
Yeah. I'm super ready for all the overreactions from group stages.
Are you kidding
best
me?
of 1 games. Because there's so much that goes into this with everyone talking about not just this team, but their whole region. Mm-hmm. And you have your one representative. If the first game between like EU and NA, whichever way it goes, the entire region is going to be like, told you so, way better than this entire
Knew your region sucked all along.
Like it's one game from 2 teams, and it's going to expand into the entire team for the whole year, and like that type of weight is behind it.
Oh man.
So definitely looking forward to that.
Like, the good thing is that have you guys checked the schedule? Because
Yeah.
TL should come up like top team on first
wow.
day.
Yeah, but if we don't, it's so.
God. Because the nice thing for LEC
Because they play
EU
Flash
is
Wolves.
it's like if we lose on the first day, people are like, that's fair. If you guys lose on the first day, oh my God, it's over. People are gonna be like lighting pitchforks. They're like, come home, TL, we're ready.
lighting pitchforks. That sounds terrifying.
Not enough time for a torch and a pitchfork. You got to do both at the same time. We're in 2019. You can't do both.
Put some oil on your pitchfork first, and there you go. Or the Lord of Light or something. She just
there's a Game of Thrones reference in here somewhere. You got it.
Honestly, yeah. For people that don't know the schedule, Team Liquid, their second game is of the day is versus Flash Wolves. That'll be their first matchup, and then they have Fongvu Buffalo. So that first day are projected to be the bottom 2 opponents for them for group stage. So that's why people could get super let down. Game 1 of the day, though, SKT versus G2. And we haven't touched on SK Telecom yet. We can start it off with Vedius analysis for G2 being better than SK Telecom. Are you guys on board? Because you have spent a lot of time with them. Can you at least relay?
Drakos was on.
Wait.
I was on board. Yeah, I was on board.
Shout out to my boy Vedius. Like, this is how this goes. He makes a tweet like that. He makes it saying, oh, this is a great meme. Oh, I bet I can wind people up. But the thing is when it comes true, he'll double down and be like, I was absolutely serious when I made that tweet. And if it doesn't, he'll just meme himself and he's like, it's another copy paste. Like, I don't think it's fair to play both sides of the fence, but it's
So
definitely
he's a
what he's
fraud.
I was gonna say, are we just gonna expose him here on the podcast?
Yeah, he was exposed.
That just happened.
If you make 100 bold predictions in a row, they're just not that bold anymore. That's my only comment.
Oh, he's got the freak school of thought
But I think if you did
on bold predictions.
D2 will win worlds. There you go.
I think if you did sit down, and I was actually aligned with Vedius. I feel like if MSI had happened, let's say 5 weeks ago, I was watching G2 middle of the season, and I watched a lot of the LPL, so I was keeping an eye on IG, and that wasn't a good look for them. I was like, holy shit, I actually think Europe could win MSI. Like, if it happened right now. At the very end, even though they had an amazing final, just because of taking into account the meta shifts that are incoming, maybe if we see the meta shifts that are incoming on the new patch for MSI, the like Super Saiyan level up of like all of these other teams, now I'm much less confident. And then you also throw like the Mickey issue on top of it. But like, I can understand. I don't think it's completely out of the realms to be like, you know what, at some point, no one expected the Western teams to do well into this coming Worlds. When are we finally going to like just kind of throw off the shackles of East versus West and finally get behind a Western team? And if you were going to get behind one, I'd say G2 is probably a pretty safe bet. So, you know, if Vedius wants to go like throw the Hail Mary, I can understand it. Don't agree with it, but I can understand it.
Also, just stylistically, I think that the game has been pushed now so much to be more about early game, and I think lane dominant style is valued really highly right now. And I think that unlike in the past, usually when I thought about lane dominant teams that often fell off in mid to late game, I had faith in G2 to pull it through. And I think that just like tower plating in this season really, really incentivizes aggressive skirmish focus early play. And I think that's exactly where G2's wheelhouse is. So it felt like if they were going to attack and take down a team like SK Telecom would be stylistically a matchup that they could win.
Yeah, so I saw him saying that G2 were better than SKT. I didn't see why. And I started going through the actual matchup, and I was like, wow, biggest issue for them, to me, is going to be trying to deal with Teddy and Mata.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily laners.
They're
Because that was his argument. He's like, Teddy and Mata are terrifying, but I think Teddy is a really good team fight ADC.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just.
And
We just don't really like to team fight a lot. They kind of like this 3v3 and this 2v2 and this other bullshit going on.
Okay, so that's the answer. They're not gonna try and deal with a mid game, SKT team fight. I guess it's gonna be a lot of like Galio bans and trying to keep them in like less mobile compositions then, because one of the biggest things for me to Mata, like why were they so good, Teddy and Mata? Yes, late game Teddy is amazing, but Mata's engages through lane phase as well as through the mid game were actually insane to me. I thought that he was just so good at forcing the fights in the small seconds of positioning where SKT had an advantage. And so that was going to be one of the issues. And then if they have a lane phase where you have Perks and even Promiscu, like the worst possible scenario for G2, then I feel like it's going to be so hard because Teddy gets the 2 items so quickly, and then you have Mata roaming around getting these engages. I don't know. That's how I was going through it, seeing it unfold. Maybe, and especially if they have Mickey X, then it'll fare better. But that was kind of the main idea. Do you know what like his game plan for attack for G2 better than SKT was going to be? Either of you?
I mean, not entirely.
No, he did when we were on E4.
Oh, top lane was the thing that he thought.
He said that on E4, I'm quoting Vedius, don't flame me in the Reddit comments. Vedius said that when watching Khan, that Khan tends to play over aggressive, and depending on your matchup, that you can punish that because it gives away a lot of isolated deaths. That Teddy and Mata, while they are superstars, don't necessarily smash you in lane. It is more about that 5v5. And so he felt that there were instances where G2's playstyle could try to snowball or abuse SKT in a lane phase, and then you just try to run away with the game from there. I think was the sentiment. Fair
enough.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, for Teddy, it's like his laning stats. I was just checking, like he's up on average at 10.5 CS ahead of his opponent, right? Like they're not like super lane focused,
winning,
but winning. There you go. But it's always so tough because I guess you're not exactly sure how strong Korea is, like certainly they came off of a rough world. So some people I think have some doubts of like, oh, well, maybe what if the region just got weaker and then the competition, regionally doesn't mean as much and so on and so forth. But, Teddy and Mata have really impressed me. Mata has always been an absolute monster internationally as well. As you say, his engages, like their team fighting is so good and they're so good at finding fights and forcing fights where they need to. I think that is one of the difficulties that any team that is going to try to play, side lanes and split push and try to avoid them is going to face, because this is not a team that is just going to kind of like wander around and not know what to do. Mata is going to flash engage and they're going to dive you, or they're going to force an objective, or they're going to do something. And that certainly is, one of their big strengths. I also think that for SKT, one of the things you always really have to deal with is the fact that like Clid has been such a monster. Like I think Clid was the best jungler in the LCK this year. Watching a lot of the SKT games, and he is such a strong player, and he's so good on these early playmaking champions, right? Which can always make it hard to punish those lanes. I do think that Khan can be like more of a liability if there's one guy that you're looking to on SKT. I think Khan is kind of maybe the way in, but Teddy and Mata, I feel like while they're not super lane dominant, they're rarely like also crushed in lane. And if you were trying to be really aggressive, then I think Clid is often very good at punishing that and actually tracking the enemy junglers. Like he played so much Lee Sin, so much Jarvan, and this guy was like monstrously good.
Yeah, I also tried to play the G2 side. I put on my G2 hat and I was crafting my game plan, and a lot of it I thought after this game one was where I first got the idea of like, people are going to have some big overreactions, because Caps against Faker, Caps can literally go 10-0 versus Faker. Like Caps is, and they talk about this all the time from talking to the teams that have scrimmed him even when he was on Fnatic, but especially in scrims, they're like, Caps is either 10-0 or 0-10 every single scrim. He's always going for that fight. And for me, Clid also, like in the early stages of SK Telecom, when they first put this team together, some of the big mistakes were him playing super aggressively, and then like not being able to follow up, or they weren't ready for that type of change yet. And I feel like there's so much that depends on this game for how is Caps and Faker gonna go, and so many eyes are going to be on this lane anyways, because this is the kind of pride of EU versus Faker, greatest of all time.
I know that we talk
going head to head.
We talk a lot about like the lanes, like top versus top and mid versus mid. I actually think this entire tournament is decided by junglers.
Yeah,
I think one of my biggest concerns was like, I know people will say that it's like Promiscu and Perks, and I just like talking about that a lot. But ultimately, my biggest concern is Jankos. And not that Jankos is a bad jungler or anything. That's not what I'm trying to say. But, it's a very different style when you're used to jungling where your lanes are just smashing 1v1 and you are just like mechanically the stronger, because Jankos was out jungled in the LEC by guys like Cold, and now he's going to face like his lanes are not automatically going to win. That just won't happen against the caliber of competition here. And you're also then dealing with a very different jungle style than what you saw domestically. Like Clid and Ning, very different. Maybe he fares better against Xmithie, because I think Western style jungling versus Eastern style jungling is actually a big thing, versus are you working around your jungler or are you working around your laners? Ning works around his laners. He's not like, this isn't a situation where his laners create space and then like the jungler makes a play with it. This is, my laners are winning and I'm just going to repeatedly Predator Gragas gank you until you are dead, or we're going to skirmish and look for a kill, and it's just a very different mentality. So like maybe Western style jungling works out and they're able to deal with that, or Clid and Ning are just going to absolutely rip kids apart.
Yeah, I just also think that the other thing you're talking about there with Jankos, like sitting, I would say, a pretty comfortable season in terms of how he got to play the jungle with most of his lanes winning. I think the other thing is ultimately, this always shows up when teams are dominant in the region, and showed up for playing teams too. And I think to a certain degree it's true for G2. While they were tested in a few instances, it doesn't feel like they've been fully pushed to the limit. Yeah, there were a few games, but outside of that, I still don't think, in the way that like Fongfu Buffalo and Flash Wolves have probably had a lot of weaknesses exposed across their series, I don't think G2 has had that experience yet, where they've really learned like where there are holes in their gameplay. And maybe some of that is coming through scrims now that they're scrimming international opponents. But also I do wonder if like what we've seen so far isn't going to be indicative of actually how they play on an international stage, matching up against other world-class teams.
It's that whole thing. You see INTZ in their own region. They look like a completely different team than when the caliber of competition gets higher because they don't even get to the stage of the game where their gameplay actually matters.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's true? Like you have that kind of view though because of the 6-0 against Origin in playoffs, right? Like that was their playoffs, them just slamming Origin over and over. Because going into playoffs, they lost 4 of their last 5, and and watching those games, it started to feel like, oh, there actually are, some holes that are showing up a bit because that was a bit of a concerning stretch, I think, for a lot of G2 fans. They lost to Splice, SK, Fnatic, and Misfits.
It's just like context matters so much there because I agree with you. You watch that as an analyst and you're only given the tape and you're like, well, there are holes, there are clearly weaknesses. I think they were revealed here. But you talk to the team, and of course it's biased because it's coming from the team, but the team's like, we have nothing to play for. We're already qualified for first. Why would we want to stress an injury that we already have? Why would we want to burn out our players before a big international event? Like, you can take the space there and you can relax, and then you can turn it on and find that 6th gear. So it's actually so hard because like the end tape that you have is you have a team whose context they didn't need to push it into overdrive, and then in their playoffs they face the same team 6 times. So like, how much takeaway is there?
I really, what you said about the jungling with guaranteed winning lanes really resonated with me, and like the difference.
From the jungler.
You're like, this is the solo queue dream.
Preach, bro. Preach. Like, so many times, it's like it's a meme not only on broadcast and in Twitch chat and everything, but in every single game. The better jungler wins type of thing. But it really is just such a different world where, like, jungling is so complex. Yes, a lot of it is all this decision making, but sometimes you don't have the same decisions that are available to you.
When the decision is, do I leave my jungle to this super fed Jason, the Rek'Sai, or do I die? Your decisions are significantly
it's like
less interesting.
Yeah.
You can either play like with lane pressure and their entire jungle revealed and make decisions with perfect information, or you can live in like a shadowy abyss of Fog of War where everything is going to kill you at any given moment. And I think I know what side of the coin I want on that one.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw like one of the kind of examples that I saw of people being able to answer Jankos and that being a way that G2 lost was the Misfits game, and in that game, it really did feel like it was, Maxwell kind of being able to actually, like, every time Jankos...
That was Elise, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was the Elise versus Rek'Sai game, and it was one of those situations where, Jankos was having a good game, and it wasn't like he was getting slammed, he was getting kills, but the plays were just kind of consistently getting answered, and every time that they were answered, it was kind of like a little bit more in Misfits' favor, and it was kind of pushing the arrow, so to speak, a little bit more in their direction. But again, it was promiscuous, and it's always hard to kind of judge these games and hard to know like how much to take from it, as you say, because if you're already locked in first place, there was kind of a similar discussion with Team Liquid where it was like they're already guaranteed their bye, and then they lost 3 games right at the end of the season, and people like, half people are like, well, Team Liquid sucks now, and the other half are like, well, they already had first, so they didn't care, and it's hard to know. Like, one of the things I think I mentioned to you guys on Euphoria was one of the kind of concerns, or I don't know if it's even a concern, but more one of the questions I had was, how will Caps perform now that I felt like his best competition had been taken away from him in Europe? Because Perks and Caps were definitively, I think, 2 of the best mid laners in the world, right? They showed that at Worlds last year. MSI, I think, was an even better tournament for Caps. But those guys were like such rivals and such amazing mid laners, and they're playing against each other. And now they're on the same team, and it felt like, well, you just took away the best competition for your mid laner, and like it's harder now, right? Like, who is the guy that besides them that is preparing you for the rookie and the fakers and like those style of players, right? Because I don't think that Nuke Duck, like as strong of a season as he had, and some of those players are up to that same level. I think Fevivin certainly isn't anymore. Like, I think it's hard to have players on that level, and I think Perks and Caps had this like awesome situation where you had 2 of the best mid laners in the world on opposite teams. Those guys are rivals, they're competing, and putting them on the same team did make G2 stronger, but it also, I think, killed a lot of the competition in Europe, because when I looked at so many of those games, it's like, well, as you say, your lanes just win by default because your players are just simply more talented.
Do you believe in the mantra that your region is only as strong as your weakest team? Because I think that's like one of the key things that makes the LPL and the LCK so competitive, is that it feels like there's not just like one really good team, that there's at least like 3 or 4, if you will.
So I wouldn't say your region is only as strong as your weakest team, but I would say you are only as good as your competition. Like, I do buy more into that. And I think that it's not like a 1-to-1 kind of reality. But like, I think you can have an absolute garbage team in your region and still be incredible, right? But you do need some form of competition, right? If you put G2 in like, and they only play against like, you know, the semi-pro teams for an entire couple years, I think they would for sure get one.
Couple of years.
So,
You know what I mean?
so
Like-
the interesting thing is that I think this is exclusively a problem for Western teams because the LMS had the same problem, right? Where like Flash Wolves are like pretty much the only team. Yes,
But the problem is that
but they can scrim China and they can scrim Korea. And so this is exclusively a Western problem where let's say you guys are in an unfortunate situation where, and I think we are, to a certain degree, LEC is too, where the top 3 teams are all pretty competitive. Yes, G2 is a stand above, but for your guys' playoffs, I mean, that's why NA fans are arguing like, who should have gone? Blah, blah, blah.
C9, TSM, all had the kind of little circle beating each other.
Yeah, it's good, but like it's just not sustainable. It's only not sustainable in the West because of where we're located and the fact that you can't just, oh, well, things aren't going great in the LMS. I'll go scrim the LPL. I'll go scrim the LCK, right? So it's just, it's a unique disadvantage that we have.
A new tournament format. We take the worst teams from all of the regions, last place, and then you throw them in with the best teams from the play-ins. Loser stays or winner stays. There you go.
See,
That's how we build positive sentiment.
we talked about this. Like, did we talk about it on the dive?
Yeah.
I just remember talking about. So
Yes.
here's the pitch. It's thrift rivals. The worst teams from both Europe and NA go to fight each other.
Oh my God.
And I'm sure the teams and the players will be delighted to be included.
Yeah, we had a hard time coming up with why they would want to play in our
Thrift rivals?
in this tournament that we're coming up with.
And thrift rivals, yeah.
Thrift rivals. Oh man.
I would love to see it though.
I actually
And just
I would love to see
answer
it,
it once and for all.
Who is the worst? The question on
It's not
everyone's
who's the
mind.
best.
Yeah, people are over that. It's
Yeah.
IG. Pff,
Yeah,
move
come
on.
on.
Yeah,
Old news.
Tell me who's the worst. Rogue, 100 Thieves.
And
Comes
North
out on
America
bottom.
needs something else to cling to, you know? We need-
I was wondering, like, would it be fun for, like, if people dictated what picks they would have to pick or stuff like that, but then we wouldn't get the test of, you know, them actually doing full try hard and seeing who empirically is.
But realistically, like if you send all of the 10th place teams to a tournament, how many people are going to try hard? Like that's like a feels bad. As a player, if I'm sent to the 10th place
Man,
tournament,
I'm
I'm
gonna
like,
try hard because I'm not about to be the worst of the worst.
I mean, what did you think all those IEMs were? Like,
oh,
God.
sorry, some of those were just knock. And then people's like, the casters have to get on stage and like, okay, how do I sell this competition? We've got, like,
Unicorns of Love have won. An
Yes,
international
we have-
tournament. What a monumentous feat. All right, I'm done. I won't.
Well, no,
fight it
because
anymore.
sometimes just people want the international experience. They want the opportunity to scout new players. A lot of different signings will happen at like. I think you could get it. I think we could control this. And then the cherry on top is what we do is we had in the audience like little tools, and they get to press buttons and they change Summoner's Rift. So they're watching the game
Yeah,
happen.
we have the Bartle Royale thing where the ring soldier is singing like, I'm sorry, 100 Thieves and Rogue, you've taken too long. The ring will now shrink closer and closer to the Baron, and you will fight or you will die.
Dance for us.
oh no.
Is
Sorry,
there
Jason Rowe.
any particular matchup from day one? I'm having
Get
a
us
hard
out,
time
Rogue.
getting
Get us
past.
out.
Wait. Here's a question. Do you guys think IG or SKT?
Oh,
We
yeah.
know what's happening over in
IG.
Europe.
Oh, for number one?
Yeah.
I think IG.
Yeah.
How much?
I think-
Is it like this much? Is it like this much?
I think.
How big is the gap?
We're showing
Is it a little
measures
gap?
this into.
This is why you don't go this way. You have to go this
Oh,
way.
I see.
I think can definitely be competitive. My biggest question is like what form are we going to see in Faker? Like I would love to see Faker, you know, back to like last time he was in Worlds, at Worlds 2017. Yes, his team lost in the finals, but Faker I think played one of, if not the best tournament of his career. Like he was so insane that tournament. It felt like he was trying to win every lane at once. If we get that level of Faker, I think SKT can take down IG. It's just after watching Worlds, after watching Rookie make every top mid laner in the world just look bad, I was like, ooh, if he does that to Faker too, I don't think SKT can win.
Yeah. So my first reaction when I heard the Vedias saying G2 is for sure second, I was like, well, I had SKT as possibly, you know, number one there, there with
I think
IG.
it's
So
close.
that was one of the biggest shocks to me. So I do think it's really close between them. Again, I kind of agree with what Vedias was talking about, though, with Khan is probably their worst matchup. Into the Shy seems really scary, though.
Yeah, but I think that what's his face, Teddy and Mata, the classic what's their faces are better than the other what's their faces,
So
Jackie Love and Ballet.
They both placed faceless in their houses
Yeah.
for the SKT bottom
Now they're
lane.
nameless. You just don't get to ever refer to them again.
Because I agree with you. Like the Shy versus Khan, you give that to the Shy. I personally think Ning's playing better right now. Although sometimes that guy's just like
Cliz
a
been
coin
so
flip.
good,
You
though.
have no idea what kind of Ning's gonna pop
I have
off.
just loved watching Ning in IG games because it was actually insane to me. I'd be like, what is he doing? And I'm like, wait a second. He killed the AD carry. Yeah, he died, but that's definitely worth it.
Sometimes he's definitely trolling though. Sometimes he's like 4-0 and he's like, I'm gonna kill the AD carry 1v5.
And
Instead, it's like I'm gonna give my shutdown to the AD carry.
And there was literally, I forget which game it was, but we were watching it and it was right in front of Baron. I was like, oh, he's going to do it. And then the AD carry lived with like 10 HP. And I was like, oh, they're doomed actually now. That's Baron and they lose. Welp.
LPL jungling is always a
that's-
treat. It's like always. I love it.
Ning actually just my blood boils whenever I think. And then people see like one tournament of his and he plays the best tournament of his life and everyone's like, he was a god. I was like, did you not just see him run it down his Xin Zhao when he was versus like anyway.
I have a lot of respect for him.
I think his highs are real high, but his lows
he
real
never
low.
backs down.
Yeah, I like that in a jungler.
Like Faker and Rookie, let's just say that's a wash based on matchup. But like the bot lane, I'm like Teddy Mata versus Jackie Balan. That's over to SKT. So like by quick maths here, and if Ning's having a bad day, SKT theoretically should be the winners.
Yeah, I do think it's super close.
The thing that excites me about this tournament a lot is that one, just the level of the solo laners, especially, and then also the meta that we're in, where there's a decent amount of flex picks, and it doesn't feel like you're hard doomed on blue side or red side. Like at the drafts, to me, it felt pretty balanced. Like I think there's arguments to take both sides. I'm sure some coach will slide in my DMs and be like, "You're crazy, blue side's hella OP. What are you talking about?"
Blue side's really strong if you can flex like Ryze, Silas, Aurelia.
Yeah, if you can play all the flex picks, then red side loses kind of counter pick advantage all the time.
Exactly. It depends a lot on your players.
Yeah, but I think that the thing that excites me a lot is that it feels like the meta is just now getting dipped into. Nautilus mid, obviously rising to a certain degree. Not that I want any of these mid laners to play
Saying
Nautilus.
that, but like Nautilus only shows up like once in every 7 games.
Well, I mean, he's got 5 picks. That just the
There was
fact
like 20 million games.
yeah, the fact
That's not even 1 in 7. That's
But
way
that's-
worse than that.
But he's like he's the 5th most
seemed like
picked over
quick maths
plans,
is very quick.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not like I think Nautilus is the defining pick. It's just that the meta is so diverse
That's what
right
everyone
now.
wants.
in terms of
Faker
solo
versus
lane
rookie, Nautilus versus
Nautilus-
Malzahar.
Lissandra.
Wouldn't that be the great? Okay, so we've been waiting
That's like at
5
All Stars.
years.
We got fucking Zach versus Malzahar as AP Zach. I'm like,
Yeah.
are you trolling? This is
Yes.
not what I wanted to see.
By the way, definitely he was trolling.
Yeah.
That was hard trolling.
So all I'm saying is like meta's super diverse. Hopefully, I don't want to see a Nautilus ever. Not that it's not a fantastic or can't be a fantastic pick. Just that I want to see people on like hyper outplay champions. And I'm just saying that like that makes it so potentially explosive. And I think that patch 9.8 is still definitely not 100% figured out. And I want to see like especially what the LPL's take is on it, what G2's take is on it, because they're notoriously insane. So
Yeah. I mean, I want more of the same, which is the Silas, Ryze, Aurelia, Akali. Like, these are primed for me for these matchups for these players. That's what I want to see them on anyway, and I want to see these outplays. So hopefully we get to see that rookie Faker matchup in all of its glory,
I think
rather than something like the Zach style.
that would be the worst line. I think IG win if the gap between solo laners is actually just that massive.
Yeah.
Like the Shy and Rookie are actually just untouchable god. Boom, IG win. Otherwise, I think in team play, SKT are stronger.
Okay, you sent out a tweet at the beginning of the episode to see if we could get some Twitter questions.
oh yeah, bring it in.
Okay.
So let's hear what we got.
do we want to start with the fun one?
Sure.
Okay.
Wait, they're not all fun?
Well, there's a lot of them actually. Twitter came in pretty hot here.
You can pick 2 or 3, whatever the best
Yeah,
ones are.
just follow your heart, Frosco.
Okay. I'm trying to get.
Well,
Okay, well, the
you
fun
ready?
one is that which region's casting team would win in a 5v5 game and why is it Oceania? This came in from at Rusty Ballbags. I don't know if you guys have heard.
See, it's generous to think that Oceania will get all 5 members to a tournament whatsoever without a plan. So
But the thing is
competitive rule.
Yeah, Rusty's toxic.
the thing that we like to talk about behind stage is this idea of like Hunger Games. So you just have to think, where's my like solo? Is it here?
yeah, if you have to think about the original movie Battle Royale or any Battle Royale,
That one is much more violent.
Who would win in an actual death match? That's what we like to think about. here.
LCS or LEC?
We've been discussing this for multiple years, by the way.
Deficio dropping. yes, some people are sad about him leaving. Best thing that's happened to our Battle Royale Death Squad. That's all I'm saying.
I also like that both teams have most people just going to the gym all the time now too. It's like everybody's enlisted.
Was it a coincidence? We started talking about the Hunger Games, and now suddenly everyone's lifting.
Everyone's like, well, we're not gonna lose.
And I will say I have some concerns about the 1v1 versus Medic, but Medic is a very
Also a
large
doctor.
man.
He's just gonna like hit a pressure point. You just hit to the ground.
But
You're like,
see what Kobe and I were talking about. You know, we're looking.
Dale's
more-
a doctor too. I don't know what you're
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
about.
We have Mark as well. We have 2 doctors on our team.
Wait, Mark counts for your team?
We're not taking Mark. Don't worry. If we're limited to 5,
I thought
we're
it
not
was
taking
6v6
Mark.
for 5v5. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
no, what's your...
it's more of a pack approach. You know, we're trying to pick you off one at a time. We're not trying to 1v1 versus Medic. It's more like a 5v1 at the end.
Okay. You're at like the conch or whatever that thing is in the
Yeah.
middle.
The heck you talking
Okay.
Where all the weapons are.
The
Yeah.
weapons are. Are you guys? You see, you look across. Maybe there's like a flowers. There's the Kobe. There's the Azale. You have Freak. Maybe you have his dog. I don't know who your 5th member is.
Dash has got to be in there.
Dash.
Yeah, we got Dash for sure.
Yeah.
Do you run towards it or do you run into?
Ooh.
Oh, we're
it?
definitely a towards it team.
Yeah,
We-
Dash is really fast. He ran Chacking University.
Oh,
So
that's
he
actually-
just runs over and he gets all the weapons first, and then
Medic is a big target then.
There you go.
That's the issue with Hunger Games with only 2 teams. That's all I'm saying is that whoever is faster probably just wins because weapons are really.
so we won
important.
then.
That's why.
great.
But that's why Rusty was including Oceania. You know,
Oceania.
Oh yeah, I like how we just moved away.
LPL
there used to be
broadcast.
more.
Well,
teams also.
they got Spawn, Rusty, Ejim, Pyrotechnics.
Mm-hmm.
What else do they have?
They're dead.
Various comedians.
Oh
that
yeah,
they cycle
the
through on their
comedian
desk.
crew.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Keep 'em
I
alive,
don't
that's
see us losing to anyone. I
What?
just
You,
cannot.
what? You
see
guys
it.
are trolling.
I think there's 0% chance.
Also
you
in
lose
League
to
of
anyone.
Legends, who would slam them?
I mean,
That's
That's
probably
pretty
true,
That's
yeah.
probably. I'll give you that one. I mean, I'm really bad. Trevor is also really bad.
Although
So,
no,
like,
I saw
we don't
Freak
even
play
have a full
last night,
5.
and that was
Yeah,
unacceptable.
well, as soon as he locked in Lee Sin, I even said, "Oh, we're trolling." Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Oh, I see.
He
So
literally
then I locked in the team
every
of support.
Q he hit, he took. Did not matter. He's 06. He's gonna go 07
Yeah.
for that Q.
I like the strategy of taking his Q and then kicking them away every time.
I tried my little heart out. Okay, next question. Has League of Legends been solved from a macro perspective?
No.
Are there
Absolutely
still
not.
undiscovered fundamentals?
Yes.
We're good at this game, right, Ross?
I mean,
Wow.
if the game was never patched, I think it'd take a couple years before people felt like it was really 100% figured out. And I feel like we wouldn't. I don't know if we'd ever get to the same depth that a game like Melee is always a good example, right? Where like the game continuously people learn more and more.
Yeah, the tier list changed like 8 years later, 10 years later.
yeah.
I don't think it's solvable. There's 140 champions. I think you could play the game for 5 years and there would still be changes because if you are on the same patch for 5 years, then people are mastering so many more different champions and having
Pull
the
a Dracos.
having
Oh, I
the
was gonna do that
ability.
too. Now I want to look bad if I go. Bye, Bye, Kobe. All right. Anyway, continue. Yes.
I think that it's like you just get more and more and more counter picks, more and more picks that people are actually mastering and being able to pick up. And like the game state is never the same twice, right? Like with mixed champions, with like different actually like dragon spawning and things like this. I don't think it's a solvable state, like truly solvable, 100% perfect.
I think the only issue, because I agree with you, in a theoretic world, it should be like that. But the problem is that so many, and I talk to a lot of pro players, they all say the same bullshit sometimes, which is you can't win that matchup. The matchup goes like this. This is the only viable champion. Like they put everything in a vacuum and they'll never be willing to either reach outside the known quantity or like do their own theory crafting, or it's super rare, which is why we actually have this reputation in broadcast of like really intelligent players about the game versus someone who is just like the team player who has like insane mechanics. And so while it should be about like mixing and matching and like evolving everything, because it's just the same players over and over, like some of these guys are just locked into such a mentality of I can only play this, I will never play it into X, and when I do it's always going to go like this. I'll never test my luck on the day.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because the patches are changing though? Like
Yeah,
that's part of my argument is that it's people like when I talk to them, like a lot of the pros I talk to are like that. I fully agree. But I also will be like, well, what about this matchup? This is something that I think is actually really strong. They're like, yeah, but like I don't really have time to practice it, right? Or like people will just ban that out if you play it one game because they don't think other teams will play it and that sort of stuff. But if the patch is never changing, I feel like there's more opportunity.
So I think that it all hinges on if there are people who are willing to be innovators. I think that the biggest issue is we've never existed in a period long enough where there hasn't been a patch that I think we've really gotten to test this. So we can't 100% know like how people react. But you have guys like
Welcome
Yuta.
back.
who are hi,
Have
Kobe.
a seat.
Feel
Join
better.
us.
You guys have guys like Nutek who are prepping things like Swain as a specific counter pick for one specific matchup. In that case, it was Lysandra. You have guys like Caps who are literally like a lot of people call him the worst player to play solo queue with because he's running it down with all kinds of crazy picks. But then a year later, some of those crazy picks that he was experimenting with, in this case Wukong mid, do actually show up and do the job that they're supposed to do. So while I think like 80% of our player base, probably even 90, maybe even 95% of our pro player base will make the concerted decision like this is what's good. I will put as much time into it on this because 5% difference on a champion I'm actually going to play 30 games is way more important than getting to 70-80% on some kind of fringe flex pick or something.
I don't know what we're talking about, but I really enjoyed his Pike mid, bringing that back because that was something that everyone saw in solo queue for so long. And we were waiting for to have our competitive game with it, and we didn't get it for such a long time. But then it was used so well in playoff game. And they found the victory as well. So like those types of things come back even later, give you more options.
All right, here we go. Lightning round. If you were tasked to make a team from the East and the West, which players will you add to the roster? And note, you cannot add more than 2 players from the same team. So you get LCK, LMS, and LPL to make one team of 5. No 2 players can be from the same team.
Okay,
and you get NA and EU to make a team of 5.
Important clarifier here. Is it players currently playing in the East and or West,
Yes,
or is it
we're limiting it?
We're not going to pick
I would like Core JJ right off the bat.
Hey,
I mean, honestly,
Western team.
honestly, who's the bottom lane? Is it the Team Liquid bottom lane? Would you take that?
Yeah, I'd like
that-
G2 solos, TL bottom lane, and then who's your jungler? Probably is there like who do you think is the best EU jungler besides Jankos if you can't take?
Cold or Yankos, depending on
Yeah,
what
but
style
depends
you
on what
like.
style you want. Cold is
So
much
you
more
couldn't
like
take Jankos if you take both the G2 solos. So like,
So,
I mean, I'm not putting a huge amount of thought, but like immediately I'd just be like TL bot lane, G2 solos, and then probably Cold.
Jungler's hard. I don't know.
Depends on what you want.
We have
Might
a lot.
actually
We
be
have
a
a lot of
banging
good.
team.
I don't know.
That's true.
NA actually has a lot of good junglers.
That's true, actually. Maybe Spence. What about Svenskeren? Yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that team as just like a quick jump to it. G2 solos, TL bot, and Svenskeren.
I don't know enough about Svenskeren to have a strong opinion.
Broxo would be the person.
So he definitely has had some super bad performances in the past.
Yeah, Brox is a really good one too.
Cold's just like
Brox has like looked a little worse this season, but I do think when you build a team that's full of really strong laners, he's always been good. Like that's what his role in Fnatic, right? Was setting up very strong laners to succeed. So
I like Brox a lot.
stylistically, that makes
Yeah,
sense
Brox
to
is
me.
really good.
But here's the fun side now. I'm thinking you take the Shy. Now, do you take Faker or do you take Rookie?
We get to see in this tournament.
I love
Yeah,
that.
post.
The cop out.
You gotta take the goat.
If we have to pick right now, I'm gonna pick Rookie. I'm not picking the goat.
I'm picking the
You
goat.
can have the goat.
Yeah,
We got the GOAT.
he's
I'm
not
getting the
in.
Rookie.
What?
I'm getting Faker.
All right.
Were you
now-
gonna,
have the most
is someone
popular
gonna
team.
pick Dornby?
Yes, actually, thank you.
I wanted.
Okay, so then who's
Who's your bot lane?
uh
I think you pick
I'm picking Uzi.
oh actually that yeah
I'm
the
picking
Mata
Deft.
Uzi bot lane was.
I'm still picking Uzi.
Deft was a god this split.
I can't get away from Uzi.
Deft Mata. Yeah,
Uzi's
give me
awesome.
that old.
so if I have Faker,
so
I can only
hard.
take one more SKT. Of course, I mean we're putting very little thought into it. You have to really like look at it closely. Let's go
the worst
Faker, Uzi, Mata, the Shy, and Tarzan. Yeah. There you go.
Got him.
Not Tarzan, by the way.
I said Tarzan.
I almost said Tarzan. I was like, oops.
Your brain size upgraded. Good job.
Slow, steady process. Back here. In the
I think
homeland.
that's a pretty good team.
Do either of you take notes on professional sportscasters for tips and tricks? Any announcer you try to learn from in sport?
I don't have any specific ones. I do watch NFL and NBA games a decent amount, but I don't have like someone I look up to.
Yeah, I've similarly like I will watch sports and I have gone back and like read some like broadcast books and things like that and tried to learn from some of them. I really like it's actually funny. Like one of the guys I think is a really good presenter is the guy from like Spicy Hot Ones. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah, the interview.
Yeah, the interviewer. Like I actually have thought he's really, really good because he does such a good job of in his interviews. It's not about him whatsoever. He highlights the person he's interviewing very, very well. He matches their energy very, very well, and that's something like I always strive to do, not just with interviews, but also like with my co-caster, is to always be able to match their energy and feel like you're finding the appropriate tone, not only for the cast but for the person you're doing it with. So that's someone I'm really impressed by. And I also think it's really fun watching some of the inside the NBA desks and stuff, like Charles Barkley and those guys, and some of the different
They
analyst
just
desks.
flame
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other.
Yeah, I think that's just fun.
I mean, for me, I read a lot of books. I think a lot of the books that are out there are kind of like shared amongst the talent team, I'd say, where it's like the art of sportcasting is one that's like highly recommended when you first get started. But for me, yeah, I think I look at a lot of like big moments in sports to look at how they're handled. But I definitely don't like regularly listen to one guy as like a end all be all for someone I'd look up to.
Kim kept telling us to look at this last season of NFL caster quarterback. I think it was definitely a previous player.
It was like Troy Aikman or something.
I don't know.
I'm not
Are
sure.
you talking about Romo?
Yeah, Romo. There we go. Because people were super.
His ability to like predict before the play happens as he watches the setup and then he calls it.
I think most of it was because of previous pro player stuff. So
I think poker also has a lot in common with League when you're looking at like different sports or competitions to compare to League of Legends, just because poker is about like available information and again trying to predict what's going to come out. And some of the poker presenters doesn't have necessarily the same pace as League of Legends, especially not for play-by-play, obviously, like on the river, but
Got King 9!
look at that flip.
but in terms of like the color casting, I actually think it has like a really nice pace to it.
Yeah, I think predictions are always the goal, right? Because that's when you look the smartest, everyone's amazed. You get to lay it out before it happens and it comes true.
I think two players will go to bot lane from each team.
That's the best feeling. I still remember
Joke's on you, lane swap.
No.
2013, our
Are you
first
okay?
season of the LCS.
He's done.
I've been sick the last 2 weeks or so. But we had Team Velocity pull an Ezreal jungle. And before the game even started, I spent like 10 minutes talking about Ezreal jungle, how it works with comp. And then as they started drafting it, I was talking about, oh my God, it's going to be so good. They could poke and then he could go to the lane so early and they get to the early tower and then you rotate around here. And then it all happened. And not very many people noticed. Like I got a couple of tweets that were like, great job. But for me personally, I was like, just the most, it's like the most fulfilling. Like you're just so satisfied after that game. You're like so happy. Even
Feels
though,
really good when prep pays off.
only like a couple of people notice. And
But
you're
hey,
like,
people
"Woohoo."
remember when you called that TP really bad. So,
That DP did suck, by the way. Good job.
I think the other thing I'll say, just as to like on a last note for this, is that I also think that one of the cool things about esports is that because the games are so wildly different, you can actually learn a lot by looking to other esports too.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I think like fighting games are great examples of like player narrative is really strong in fighter games, and also like how to handle downtime and humor. I think some of the funniest casters out there are in fighting
Basis on Artosis.
Tastosis, also a great example. I think like for like CS is also really interesting too, because I think that like the nature of the game with the breaks in it is a lot of time for like how they use their time to discuss is interesting too. So I think that like there's anything you're gonna watch is gonna have something that can be learned from it. Just depends on like what you actually enjoy watching, I think.
Yeah. I also enjoyed a lot of card games for a while.
Yeah.
When Hearthstone first came out and that was big, that was super fun because they have a lot of just the conversation.
I still love listening to Frodan and Brian Kibler. Like that's a sick duo.
Those guys are great.
The game just kind of lost my interest. So.
Funny though, because I enjoy watching Hearthstone, but I didn't enjoy
playing
casting
it. Oh, casting.
Yeah, because I casted it before. And it can be tough, right? You know, it's like the Ragnaros gets dropped down. There's like a 1 in 7 chance to hit the face, and then it happens, and you're kind of like, what do I say here? Wow, what a play. Amazing.
I only cast one Hearthstone event in Hong Kong. It was just like, it was a rough event, and it was just this one guy was just like absolutely smashing this other guy, but he just like windmilled like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop. He's playing Hunter, and it was just like just slamming Dr. Boom on 7. You guys spin Hyman on 6.
The Dr. Boom days.
Yeah, the Dr. Boom days. So I was like, this is hands down like so miserable for the other guy. There's no interaction here, so I feel you.
PvE game at times.
All right, have we exhausted our Twitter questions?
Oh, I mean, there's more, but I don't know how deep you want to go.
I think we're good. We did it.
We've gone just deep enough. Thank you for joining us. That is going to do it for our yearly episode of the Divephoria.
We might get another one for Rift Rivals or something.
That's true.
Worlds.
So
There you go.
please pray for us that we will be lucky enough to have another Divephoria episode.
There you go.
And tune in because SK Telecom versus G2 is the first game out of group stage. It is going to be Thursday night, technically. Friday. morning-ish.
Ladies and gentlemen, lollysports.com, and then there's a schedule there that you can look at,
3 a.m. Friday, May 10th, Pacific time.
which is
Google also has a
noon.
handy dandy calendar. If you just Google MSI schedule, it just pops up at the top of Google now. It's great.
Look, yeah, if you're struggling to find it, do that.
All right.
The
We are
information is
now
out there.
sponsored by Google.
Yep. Thank you, Google.
Thanks for watching. Hope you tune in next week.